Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, star seeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this.
So the first thing I want to start with is clearing the Akasha. I feel like it's the easiest place to start because really it's like clearing out the storage on your device. Not that we are devices, but it's just a good analogy to understand it. We are obviously like much more complex than a smartphone or a computer or a tablet or whatever, but the analogy really works because when you think about your device, when I think about my devices, I'm not very good at cleaning out my devices. And so I end up with an insane accumulation of photos, old documents, old friggin' like printer software, like printers that I don't use anymore, that like I haven't used in years, stuff that just doesn't, I don't need it anymore. I don't use it, like triples of pictures, just insane stuff. Old documents from when I was a student, like ridiculous, ridiculous things. And it slows me down. It's not that it's not even hard to get rid of them. It's just that I don't get rid of them and it slows my computer down or my device down. It takes up space, whatever. And so clearing the Akasha is really similar. It's like what I'm referring to are old things that we have stored in our Akasha that it can be from this life, it can be from other lives. Often it's easier to access from this life, but certainly if you go into your Akashic records and just like ask what is residual and that you're still carrying around, that you are ready to offload forever, like you delete it, you don't need it anymore, stuff will be brought to you. And it's stuff that is just dragging on your energy. It doesn't have a strong emotional charge to it anymore. There might still be some residual emotional charge, but it's very minor. And the process of clearing your Akash is so simple. So, for example, a few weeks ago, I can't even remember what was going on, but something was going on in my energy, and I realized that some like stuff was coming up to the surface that needed to be cleared. I wasn't even deliberately in my Akashic records, but and this is often the way it works too. It's just something comes to the surface and it seems completely unrelated to anything else. So I thought about my ex-boyfriend from high school, like my first boyfriend, who was not very nice to me, but he also wasn't the worst ever. He was just kind of the scrub from like the next town over from mine. And so I don't have a strong emotional charge around it. It doesn't really mean anything to me. But for some reason that came up and I could tell that it was seemingly totally unrelated to whatever it was that was going on in my own energy and my thought patterns around something else at the time. But I know enough to recognize that, oh, that's what it's related to. Like I need to let that go. And I just sat in the bath and went into my Akashic records and went through a process that's similar to the Ho'oponopono process, but just basically it was something like conjuring up that person and thanking him for the gift, like looking for the gift that he'd given me and thanking him for it, apologizing for my part in it, forgiving him for his part in it, forgiving myself for my part in it, and then just like releasing it back to source and just letting it all go. And when I did that, then one of my other boyfriends came up, and then one of my other boyfriends came up. And similarly, none of them had a really heavy emotional charge, but I could feel with each one that I was consciously releasing in that moment that it was freeing up a lot of drag on my energy. So clearing the Akasha is one of the most important things that we can be doing right now. It's one of the most important things we can be doing ever. But given what's going on in 2020 for all of humanity, clearing our Akasha of any residual drag is such a powerful act of service. It benefits us, but it also benefits everybody else. The impact of that cannot possibly be overstated. It is truly an act of service to clean up those vibrations and release because really what's going on right now is like we're all collectively ready to release it. We're collectively, humanity is ready to clear out the Akash, but it has to happen on individual levels as well as the greater collective level. So that's why we're going through so much. It's like all this old, like some of it's PTSD, some of it's just, like I said, like non-emotionally charged kind of residual crap that it just is what it is. It was what it was, and we don't need it anymore. So usually when you're doing it, it just feels like a quick, easy delete, like an easy release. Sometimes it might need to be done in layers. Like it's possible that that example I gave about going through like all of the men that I've ever been in a relationship with and releasing them, it's possible that I might have to do another layer of it at some point in the future. But for now, I could feel the difference in my own energy that I successfully released a lot of it. Maybe all of it, I don't know. We'll just wait and see. There's no need to force it. It's usually stuff that's like, it really is like just searching through your own hard drive and your own cloud and being like, what do I not need anymore? And it'll just come to you, whatever's ready to go. So that's like the least exciting, but very, very impactful that I wanted to start with before going into the really, really juicy stuff. So the next thing is healing current traumas or past traumas, whether it's from this lifetime or other lifetime. Viola, I was watching one of the lives that she did recently, and she was talking about having this similar situation where she just went into her Akashic records and was greeted spontaneously by a memory of something that wanted to be integrated. And she made this beautiful comment about like soul. It's like soul fragments or soul retrieval. And I was like, oh, yes, that's exactly what it looks like to me too. So, what I see is that when we experience a trauma, we become fragmented. We become a little bit fragmented in our consciousness, in our subconscious, as well as it's not really that our soul becomes fragmented, but we get disconnected from a piece of our soul because we're afraid of the way that that experience made us feel. And in this way, we become the ghosts. Like when you think about ghosts, that, you know, like actual ghosts that actually haunt places, they really are nothing more like actual ghosts. I'm not talking about demons or poltergeists. I'm talking about just ghosts. They really are nothing more than a fragment of a soul's consciousness that didn't get integrated. And perhaps that person passed away, or perhaps not. We sometimes leave fragments of our consciousness behind. We leave fragments of our energy behind in the world that other really sensitive people might encounter. We can be ghosts without ever having passed away in this current incarnation. And really what we're wanting to do is reintegrate those pieces. And so when we're dealing with traumas, it's the Akashic Records is a beautiful place to do it because you almost get protected by the frequency of the Akashic Records. Like when you're in that frequency of love and grace and naturally forgiveness, you're almost like protected from the lack of control that everybody's afraid of. Like when it comes to trauma, we're all afraid of being swallowed up by the emotional experience of the pain, of remembering the pain. So we're afraid of being swallowed up by the pain, and that's why we don't want to look at it, and that's why things become sort of lodged and we stay fragmented. And again, any healing that we ever do is a tremendous act of service that benefits us and benefits literally everyone and everything in all of creation everywhere. So when we're healing through the Akashic Records, like I said, that vibrational frequency kind of protects us. It somehow it just neutralizes a lot of that fear so that we can face those memories from a place where we still feel it as much as we need to in order to truly have the healing. Like it's different from being disassociated. You're still associated with yourself, but you're not. It's like in the Akashic Records, you just remember your own eternal nature and your own magnificence. And so you don't feel so afraid of it anymore. And really, you just look at the situation and you you apply a very similar process to that Ho'oponopono process, where you you look for the gift. Like, there is a gift and there is magic in it. I know that can sound really hard to hear sometimes, depending on what somebody's been through. When you're dealing with your soul, or your past traumas, you look for the gift and the magic, because I promise you it's there. Nothing that we go through in life is without a gift. It's just up to us to find it and receive it or not. Like, it's totally a free will thing. We don't have to. But if we really want to heal and release these things through the Akashic records, this is what I found is the way to it, is to go in and you can feel sort of that protection. It's like in the Akashic records, you can also feel the presence of your guides and your loved ones and everybody that's like, with you and behind you in it. And you re-experience that trauma as much as you need to. You don't have to re-traumatize yourself through it, but enough that, you can acknowledge it and receive the gift, thank it for the gift, apologize to yourself. Like, you don't necessarily have to apologize to somebody else if you can't, but apologize to yourself for any part of not being able to receive the gift up until now. Forgive the whole thing, forgive yourself, and release it with love. Release any part of it that you don't need. Release the whole thing, whatever feels right. Basically, the way I visualize it is releasing it back to like all of the oneness that is source, where it just becomes like neutralized and it reintegrates back into like the pool of 0 point energy. And it depends. Like, I've been able to do that for my traumas, and I've had a handful of very significant traumas. But for somebody who has had like really extreme traumas, like really, really extreme traumas, I just want to add the caveat that it can be appropriate to work with somebody else who can kind of act like an anchor for you and like a guide. It can be somebody who's like considers themselves a professional healer. This is a lot of what gets done in ayahuasca ceremonies, from my understanding. Now, I've never done an ayahuasca ceremony, but I first heard about it as a treatment for addiction. And usually the reason that it worked for addiction was because it helped people to revisit their old traumas, but revisit it from a vantage point where they could remember that they were souls and they no longer felt diminished by it, because we never are diminished by it. It's just that we believe we are. And we only believe we are because the way that it makes us emotionally feel is so intense, and we have forgotten as humans how to manage emotion. So that's why people feel so afraid of their traumas. But if you have really, really intense traumas and you feel like you can just feel the resistance, like it's you can't do it by yourself, then you can consider a plant medicine ceremony with like a well-renowned guide, or you can seek out somebody who's specialized in helping to facilitate the healing of trauma. But I believe through my own experience that it is that simple, of just, even if you don't receive the gift, even if you're not quite there yet, even to go in and just see what the gift is. And you can still reject it if you feel like you need to, if you feel like you're not ready to accept the gift. And also, I'll say that accepting the gift is not the same thing, and neither is forgiveness. It's not the same thing as condoning something that somebody might have done to you. If you had that kind of trauma where somebody truly did wrong by you, it's not the same as condoning that. It absolutely is not the same thing. It's recognizing that everything that we experience has a transformational potential, and it can transform us in a way that enhances us or diminishes us. But either way is just a point of view. Either way is just a perspective. And so the gift is the aspect of it that allows us to feel like even more of ourselves than we ever knew we were before, if that makes sense. So then from here, I want to go into talking about time and how time works. This is one of my favorite ever things to talk about. So we exist in multiple timelines. So if I'm just talking about my own life, Amy exists in multiple timelines right now. But that's really how manifestation works, is tuning into an already existing timeline that's available for you because it's your timeline, and moving into that and out of the one where you don't have the thing that you want and into the one where you have the thing that you want. And so Amy has multiple timelines, more than my conscious mind can even conceive of. And they're all playing out in varying ways. As well as, this is where it gets really fun and mind blowing, as well as all of the lifetimes that my soul has ever had, all happening right now. They're all happening concurrently. So because we have a temporal processing program that is our brain, we experience time in a linear manner, meaning that it's a succession of moments, past, present, future, yesterday, today, tomorrow, that kind of thing. And so on one hand, past lives are a real thing because we have a temporal timeline. So 1827, for example, is in our past. So that's how we can call it a past life. But it's also happening right now because, like I made the analogy about the film reel and how all of the little frames on the film reel exist right now. Like the whole film reel is complete. It's just that when you run it through the projector, it seems to come out in a linear way. And we are the projector. So we are processing all the events that are all occurring in this beautiful, holy, suspended moment of now, capital N, capital O, capital W. We are still experiencing it as in past, present, future. So not only do I have multiple timelines, but say one of my past lives, I think I was in Scotland in, oh gosh, maybe the 1700s. I can't remember exactly. It's not a super charged up one for me, but that person is alive right now at the same time as I'm alive, but on a different point in our human timeline. That person's consciousness is experiencing itself as an incarnation concurrently with the self that is me experiencing this incarnation, and she has multiple timelines as well. So when you think about it that way, everything becomes so multidimensional and complicated, but so beautiful. And at the center of all of it is this now moment. And the now moment is the only thing that is real. The past isn't real, and the future isn't real. The past isn't static, and that's a misunderstanding that a lot of us have. I know I had that misunderstanding for a long time where I thought, like, the past happened, it is what it is, and so, we're limited in our ability to heal the past. But then I received this download many years ago that made me realize that the past actually isn't any more real than the future is, that there are multiple pasts, and they're all fluid, and they're all ever changing, just as the future is ever changing. And that everything that we have that we believe substantiates the past only exists in the now. So the only real moment is right now, ever. And this is our point of power. And this is the point from which we create the future and heal the past. So, for example, someone might say, well, yes, like the past, it is documented. Look, I have this encyclopedia article in Encyclopedia Britannica back when we used to actually have like encyclopedia books. And it says in here, like, this is the way it went. The crazy thing is that the book is not an indication of the past. The book is an indication of right now. And that through the healing and the manipulation isn't the right word, but that's kind of what I mean. It's like the molding of the energy in the now moment. It's like we rewrite the book, but it happens so gradually that we wouldn't really notice. So as we reconsider and reconceive of the past at all times, like the past is an imaginary projection, if that makes sense. The same way the future is an imaginary projection. They are all projections from our mind, and our mind exists in the now moment. And so as we rewrite or reconceive of past events, without even realizing it, it would happen so gradually. The book that we're looking at to make reference of the past events would subtly start changing to reflect our new concept of the past. And however, this isn't to say that things didn't happen. Like, for example, as a personal example, like, it's not true to say that my son Killian didn't die, that the past isn't real, that he didn't die. And yet, that's actually not real in this moment now. I'm the one that's keeping him alive. It's not the same thing as, or keeping that alive in my energy, in my consciousness. It's not that it didn't happen. It's just that it is now of the realm of the imaginary. It's not current. It's not in this now moment, if that makes sense. And it is my recollection of it that keeps it alive in this now moment. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And that awareness actually helps me to like keep it alive in the most beautiful way that I can, the most honoring way that I can. But you can see this with a lot of people who, you know, may have had an experience or a series of experiences that help them formulate a story that they have about themselves, and they keep that story, they repeat it to themselves daily, over and over again. And they're the ones that keep bringing that event of the past into the now moment. And so they keep locking that in, but it doesn't exist anymore. There is nowhere, because everything is in the now moment. So there is no place that reality has to keep existing, if that makes sense. I hope I'm explaining this properly. So that's why visualizing is so powerful for manifestation, because we're choosing to lock in a potential timeline that of imaginary energy that already exists. It's like the pre-matter templates. The past is also pre-matter templates. We are the ones filling it in. I guess that's the best way I can put it. The past is a pre-matter template, which is a weird thing to say because it seems post-matter, but it's still pre-matter, because every time that we fill it in with our consciousness, we then kick it over into the future. It becomes what manifests into the future. I really hope I'm not being confusing. I know time is a really confusing subject, but I'm super passionate about it. So if it doesn't make sense, if any of you who are watching the replay, it feels like it doesn't make sense, just let me know and I will try to craft some new analogies to clarify it. But when we realize this, when we realize that the past is not a static fact, that it is mutable, it is flowing, it is ever changing, and that I kind of see it as like a figure eight. Like I see time as like an infinity loop, and like the past becomes the future, becomes the past, becomes the future. Like it's all there, but the connecting moment at the center is the now moment, and that's the point of manifestation, where everything becomes real. Otherwise, it's all just like flowing, mutating, changing potential that hasn't materialized. And when we realize that, we realize how much agency we have over healing the past, and that you can heal past lives right now. I remember doing a reading, and it was kind of crazy because she had this one past life. He was a soldier and he died. He got shot through the lung during one of the wars. I can't even remember which one. I think it was like maybe the American Civil War or the Revolution. And he just didn't want to let it go. Like he just didn't think he should have died. He intended to come home and have a family, and he was like needing healing, that she was so sensitive that she was picking up on it, and he was kind of like reaching out into her consciousness. I was explaining to her that she can help heal him from this now moment, because even though it seems like that happened in the past and it's already a done deal, it's not. It's a fluid reality. And so he can reach into her conscious awareness and she can reach into his conscious awareness, because it's like it's all happening at once. So we have so much agency to affect the other past lives that our soul has had / is having. It's almost like, it's not really that time is a fiction. It's a little bit like that. It's a little bit like time is fiction or the past is fiction, but it's more like our perception is so much more powerful than we realize. And we generally think that things that happened in the past just happened and that's all there is to it. And, like people will often say you can't change the past. And in a way, that's true. Like, I can't change that my son died, but I have also experienced timelines where he's still alive. And he showed me different timelines where he's still alive. And yet it's not, I can feel that it doesn't benefit me to try and move into that timeline, that this is the timeline that I'm supposed to be in, and that there's a difference between like trying to recreate a timeline because you don't want to accept the past or the timeline that you're in, versus realizing that the past is much more fluid than we give it credit for. I will try to come up with some better analogies to really lock that in. But I'll go on and talk about healing our past lives through the Akashic records. So when you're healing the past, what you're really doing is shifting timelines. So for example, another personal example is that I have this past life self who, I always feel like I've shared these things before, and then it confuses me and makes me think, like, is it just because this is a crazy deja vu because time isn't real? I don't know. Anyway, I had this past life where I was a woman and the man I was married to took away all my children and made an accusation that I was crazy. It seemed to be during, like, I don't know. It must have been a medieval period because we lived in, like, drafty, damp stone castles or stone forts. And I was locked away in a room in a tower and didn't have my children anymore. And I was in like a state of absolute grief, like to the point of like that made me insane. And I could feel that she was really impacting my ability to have more children in this life. Even though I don't have any infertility issues, I have issues around, for some reason, attracting men who don't want any children. Like, it's bizarre for somebody who wants children so much, and there are so many men in the world who want to be fathers too. Why would I keep ending up with men who don't want children? So when I discovered this past life self, it was very emotionally charged, and I had to do a lot of healing work around it, multiple sessions. But I was able to envision a different outcome for her, where another man was able to come in and rescue her, or rescue's not the, yeah, I guess that's just the easiest way to put it. Rescue her, see to her release, give her all of her children back, marry her, be an amazing husband and protector and provider, and to have more children with her. And now when I go back into that past life, she's so happy. She has this incredible radiant smile, and I can even feel the effects of it on my own life. Being able to really shift that, I think, is one of the key things that resulted in me getting pregnant with Kieran, even though Alex said that he didn't want any more children. So it's almost like when you're going into your past lives, you are shifting their timelines. You're not eradicating the timeline that needs the healing, but you are shifting a new timeline. It's like the goal of healing is not to get rid of pain. The goal of our souls is not to avoid pain, because growth comes through pain. We want pain and we want joy. We want anger and we want bliss and peace, and like we want the whole spectrum. That's what souls want. That's why we come here. So when we're healing our past life selves, what we're doing is not eradicating the timeline that is causing the pain or causing the dysfunction. We're just shifting our consciousness and inviting that aspect of our souls to shift in consciousness to another timeline as well. And it's so, so, so powerful. It's so powerful. All timelines are perfect. The one where that aspect of myself was like completely insane locked away in a tower without her children, is a perfect timeline for its own reasons that my human self doesn't need to understand. But I don't have to heal it as though it's bad and make it go away. I just accept it, but I choose a different timeline. And she doesn't have to choose a different timeline, and I don't need her to choose a different timeline in order to have my outcome. But I could feel that that was something that, like, I needed to connect with that part of my soul and that lifetime and have a negotiation with her and like dim down that charge of what was going on. But she was well, no, I was going to say she was super cooperative about moving. No, she wasn't actually. That's why it took so many sessions, because she was like really locked into her fury, and I had to go back and invite her numerous times. But eventually, when she agreed to it, she was very happy to move to a different timeline as well. So that's what I know about healing past lives, is that you can heal them from right where you are. You can heal yourself just as you can heal multiple generations from this generation that you're living in right now. You can heal multiple lives of yours, and there are certain lives, I kind of think of it as like a musical octave. Like, there are certain lives that are like the music notes. I'm not a musician. I don't know why I use analogies that I can't fully explain, but they just come into my mind. But you know, you have like on written music, you have I don't even remember what it's called. I used to take piano lessons, but where the notes are, right? There are certain lives that correspond to the current one that you're living. Like, you don't have to heal every single lifetime that your soul has ever experienced. You'll be able to feel which ones are actually the active ones that correspond to this lifetime. And then the same is true with healing physical disease. The principle that we're not eradicating anything. Eradicating disease is kind of a false premise that shows that we're afraid of the disease, like we need to vanquish it, otherwise it will vanquish us. But that's really not. The disease, again, is just an indicator, and it's a messenger, and it has a gift, and it can either enhance you or diminish you, and it's freely your choice. It's just that it's not put to us in that way, so most of us don't understand it that way. But healing is available to us at all times. It's actually very simple to heal our physical bodies. It's just that we tend to believe that healing is elusive, and so people get into a mode of being super identified with their disease, like that's who they are, and coping with the disease or being a survivor of the disease or whatever becomes so much a part of how they understand their identity that they actually don't want to heal it, because they would have no idea who they are without it. So there's that. And then B, we tend to get into a searching mode where we're constantly searching for healing and searching for health, rather than knowing that it's currently available to us right now. And so we stay in that energy where we're pushing it away, because in order to be searching, that has to mean that you don't have the thing. So as long as you're predominantly in an energy of searching, then the result you produce is the not having of the thing, which in this case is healing. So again, we are accepting the perfection of the timeline where the disease exists, and yet we're choosing a different timeline for ourselves. And everything is about a tiny course correction. Often people want quantum leaps. I know I do. I know with the things that I am manifesting and I desire for myself, my human totally wants to have them manifest overnight, because I have this attachment to a story that I won't be happy, or I won't be secure, I won't be blah, 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 until I have them, right? That's such a human thing to do. So I have no judgment, and I'm not above this in any way. But I do know, I have been shown that we all want quantum leaps, but actually those do not produce stable change, because our consciousness can't catch up with it. It's like too drastic of a change. And really, I heard somebody define trauma in that way, where trauma can be anything that's too much too fast. And I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, that's true. It can really be anything that just happens, like it's just too much change to integrate too fast, and it just like kind of fragments our psyche. So the same is true for like positive manifestation. We want quantum leaps, we want like magical healings overnight, and they are totally possible. But really what most of us desire deep down is a tiny course correction, little by little, over time. We want stable change. I think of it as like, you know, when it rains and you watch like the trail that some water starts to make as it runs in a little rivulet, like through the soil or the sand. And it kind of like, if the rain happens for long enough, then it starts to dig a deeper and deeper channel because it pulls more of the little grains of sand with it, and it like reinforces the channel, washes more sand away, but it's still happening gradually over time. And we kind of want that gradual experience. So for most of us with healing, we are wanting to shift into the timeline where the healing already exists little by little, and we can do that through the Akashic records. We can find out if there are any past lives that are contributing to this state of bodily disease. We can find out what the emotional causes are for the disease or the energetic causes, and just like gently let those go. But to accept the perfection of the timeline where the disease exists, I feel is really necessary, because then you don't have any resistance energy to it. You're just choosing differently now. You're like, okay, I've experienced that one. I've gleaned the the alchemy and the transformation that my soul desired through this experience, and I don't need it anymore. So now I can start shifting into the timeline where I'm not experiencing that. I'm experiencing pure health, because that's what my soul desires now, if that makes sense. So, in hindsight, it feels like a quantum leap, because it is so fast in hindsight. But while it's happening, it's like, it feels like, oh God, like, I need this to happen now in order to be okay. But we make it happen so fast. It depends on the perspective, though. Like, I know my mom has had health issues her whole life, and she's constantly, she puts so much energy into healing and getting better, but she can't find it, and she won't find it as long as she's seeking it, and she doesn't quite understand that. Like, she's more and more receptive to it over and over. But I think that's the thing, is like, it's just understanding like the underlying energy that we have behind any quest. And like, when we're wanting to, like, I think of people I know who've had cancer, when they're wanting to like eradicate the cancer or vanquish the cancer, it doesn't really seem to work as fast and as permanently as it does for friends of mine have just like surrendered and accepted that they have cancer, and accepted the perfection of it, and allowed it to transform them. And then it's like it just goes away. It's just a total miracle. And so quickly, although to them, I'm sure it didn't feel quick. I'm sure it felt very scary to live through. So then I guess the last thing that I wanted to talk about is the 12-stranded DNA. So the 12-stranded DNA, it's a human DNA upgrade that's available to us, that is coming on board right now for many, many, many of us. Everybody who is focused on well-being, vibration, spirituality, all that stuff, we are gradually bringing on those 12 strands of DNA. And we always had 12 strands, but 10 of them were deactivated for reasons that I don't really want to comment on, because I haven't confirmed it for myself through my own receiving of downloads. So I feel like I would just be repeating what other people say. And it's like, I feel like I need to do my own verification before I sort of repeat that stuff. But I'm sure if you want to know, you can just Google it and find out. But so we have 10 more strands available to us. And the thing about DNA is that we think of our bodies as being like solid matter, because in a way they are, but they're also constantly in evolution. Constantly. We are exchanging electrons with our environment at all times. Our cells are exchanging electrons with each other at all times. Every single aspect of our body is in flux at all times. And they are just, what's the word? Like condensed condensed energy that has condensed itself into physical expression, but on a tiny, tiny level. And they all work together to constitute this miraculous apparatus that is our physical body avatar. It's amazing, but it's all energy and it's all our consciousness. And we actually don't occupy our body. We surround our body, and it becomes denser and denser as it gets to the center, but it's still energy. So it's so mutable and flexible, and our thoughts and our emotions, our vibration, everything impacts it in ways that like even I don't understand. I can only just feel around the edges of it. It's amazing. And so our DNA is actually light. It's like light that is arranged in tiny, perfect geometric patterns. That's how it's been shown to me, that look like tiny, perfect little snowflakes. And what it looks like to me is like, so first of all, I want to point out that the double helix image that we see all the time, we kind of have to take it with a grain of salt because it's computer generated imagery, which means that it might not actually look like that. I'm not saying it doesn't. It's based on something, but we just have to remember that the way that when we're visualizing these things, or we're visualizing the cell, or we're visualizing anything, we just have to take it with a little grain of salt, that it might not actually even look like that at all. But for the purposes of sort of describing the way that I see it, is that if you imagine the double helix that we're used to seeing, and so it's this one long strand that kind of curves like a telephone wire, and another long strand, and they curve together and sort of around each other, and they're attached by these little rungs in the middle. And when you learn about DNA replication process, you learn that actually these little rungs are made up of two connecting parts. And so when they replicate, this splits open, but they split open, and then a new piece of DNA is created on either side of those. So the rung isn't solid, holding those two strands of DNA together. And the way I see it is that they're connected by a little spoke in the middle, or not a spoke. These are spokes. It's like the hub of a wheel in the middle of those rungs. And it's almost like it fills out like a wheel is the best way to describe it, the way I see it. Like for those two strands, there are 3 rungs. So each of those strands on the double helix, the 2 helixes, the left helix, let's call it, has 2 more, so it makes 3. And the right helix has 2 more, so it makes 3. And then on the other side of the spoke is another set of DNA codes that create the same pattern, where they're held together by 3. And each of those has their own spoke meeting together in the middle at the hub, so that our DNA is actually totally a round wheel comprised of 12 strands. And it almost looks like a piece of licorice all together. I'll see if I can draw it or something. I tried Googling it to see if anybody else had produced images that resonate with that, and I couldn't find any, but I'll keep looking. So we have 12 strands of DNA, and they're just coming on board, and it's just like they were unplugged, like they're Christmas lights that were unplugged. And the more we raise our vibration, our consciousness, which we're all working towards in programs like this and other ones, and the work that everybody is doing, the more they come on board. And like, I will also point out that we don't routinely have our DNA looked at. Like, we don't know how many strands of DNA the average person has lit up anymore, or not even the average person, the average light worker. We don't know how many strands of DNA have been lit up and reactivated, but they're already there. We don't have to do anything to create it. It's an automatic up level that's just happening as we raise our vibrational frequency, and it's so beautiful. And the very last thing that I want to mention is that the shift into like crystalline DNA, so, and like being a crystalline structure, the way I understand it is that the difference between, this is another analogy, the difference between just your average like rock, like mineral rock, and a crystal is that the atomic structure of the rock is very like amorphous. It's not really organized in any particular way, whereas the atomic structure of a crystal is organized in beautiful geometric patterns. And they're not really like snowflake patterns. They're not quite that complicated. They're more like straight lines, or like cubic or hexagonal, but they're nonetheless like you can really see the difference under, I think it's a monoatomic microscope. I can't remember. Anyways, so what I see and what I envision and what my guides have shown me is that we're also shifting from having that sort of denser, more amorphous, like disorganized physical structure. So our atoms are a little bit in a state of disharmony, which you can probably see through a lot of people and the various states of disease and unhealth that many of us live in. So there's a lot of sort of lack of organization in our molecular structure, our atomic structure, and this also keeps us locked in the density of the 3D, but not in a good way. And we're shifting into a crystalline structure, just as it's the same with the 12-stranded DNA. Just as we raise our vibrational frequency and our consciousness, we automatically sort of like our energy patterns and our vibrational patterns organize themselves into a coherent matter, and that trickles down all the way into all of our cells and all of our atoms, and everything sort of like organizes itself and arranges itself in a way that is so much more beautiful and geometric and coherent. Just the comparison that it's similar to also like diamonds are formed from carbon that have gone under alchemical elemental transformational process, and then they turn into diamonds, and that is what is happening. And that's not really, it doesn't really have anything to do with the Akashic records, except for that was shown to me through the Akashic records. If I can come up with some better, clearer analogies to explain how the past is not static, I will. I'll keep thinking about it. But I hope that this was exciting for you guys and made you feel super excited and anxious and in a good way to work within the possibilities of the Akasha and all the healing and transformation that is available there. So lots of love. Thank you for joining me. Take care, guys.
Thank you so much for being here with me on this episode. I appreciate you more than my words could ever say. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share, and I will catch you on the next episode.